That's where our generation, our millennial generation struggles with. But I'm seeing that Gen Z does an even better job at work-life balance and making sure that they don't take any flack from employers. They are going to put those boundaries up and maintain the boundaries. Whereas our generation struggles with that a little bit more.
Seek out profound conversations. It's only going to make you smarter. It's only going to make you more culturally diverse and open-minded. It's just a good way of looking at it.
But the thing that we worry about that is, yes, obviously it cuts through the skin, but we want to make sure that it doesn't cut through the tendon. And so for this particular patient, it did cut about 3/4 of the tendons.
Medicine,
Law, friendship. This is Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. You're listening to the Medico-Legal Brief.
one doctor, one lawyer, and a whole lot of gray area.
Hey, everyone. We are back with the Medico-Legal Brief. You got Lawyer Nik and Dr. Long. So, Long, it looks like you are in a patient room. I know that you just got off work, but, is that kind of the setup on a day-to-day?
Yeah, patient room was open and it's already the end of my shift, so I'm off duty. And I figured I'd take care of it here before I got home to some screaming kids and trying to make sure that everything gets done for them. So it would be easiest to finish a podcast here right now.
Well, it's nice to see you kind of in a different setting, more of the professional setting. I see you got your scrubs on. It's actually pretty funny because earlier today when we were talking about when we should meet, your response actually had me laughing because you said you just had somebody come in with kind of a horrible hand injury. And you didn't expect it for the day, and then that kind of changed the course of what you have to focus on.
Right. That's the fun part about urgent care is that you never know what's going to walk through the door. It could be an easy sniffles, sinus infection, and then the next thing you know, someone tried to cut their hand off, which is kind of what I had earlier today.
Without kind of giving any sort of confidential information, can you kind of tell us what you were looking at in that
Yeah,
situation?
totally. So manual labor, younger guy, he came in. I'm working on a metal fan and it just was spinning as he stuck his hand in there and it cut his knuckle. But the thing that we worry about is, yes, obviously it cuts through the skin, but we want to make sure that it doesn't cut through the tendon. And so for this particular patient, it did cut about 3/4 of the tendon. So I had to do some calling around to make sure we can get him in today to get seen by an orthopedic surgeon to take care of it.
That kind of flows into what we were talking about before with referring out to specialists. As a general practitioner, you see the craziness, and then it's kind of on you to not only address the patient and help the patient, but also guide them to the next layer of help that they probably need.
Right. And I still got to do my fun stuff, right? So I can't just leave him leaving the office with a gaping wound. So I was able to throw some stitches in there, close it up, put him in a splint, and then send him off to the orthopedic surgeon who will then reopen it and fix whatever he needs to fix on the inside.
Well, that's super interesting. And, I think that when we talk, instances like that allow us to show a little bit of our personality. And I know that over the previous podcasts, we've discussed some pretty formal topics in law and medicine. Some of them serious, some of them a little bit more lax. This might be a good opportunity for us to get to our discussion point today. And it kind of starts where, how did we meet? What's our background going back to our schooling? And not necessarily a formal education, but what our experience has been as friends and kind of determining that relationship and moving forward.
I think our first episode, we briefly talked about it. We somehow ended up in the same place, even though I don't even know how our paths crossed, but we eventually did and found out that we had been in this parallel universe together, going through middle school, intermediate school together, almost in very similar classes. And we knew of each other, but didn't quite communicate to each other until we got to high school. So the official time we met was when we were both in AP art class, and we both had some amazing art. And the funny thing about the story is that every single year that I tried out for state or try to get some of my art pieces into state, I was never, out of the 4 years in high school, I was never able to get a single piece to get past that first round where someone has to sit there and judge, ask questions, things like that. So I always thought it was so funny that Nick, who was this like sports athletic guy, he was more of the jock, comes in, what was it, junior year or senior year, you started getting interested in art?
It was junior year, and then I finally got a piece in senior year with the direction of
and I was like,
art.
Who the hell is this guy coming out of nowhere? I spent like 3 years dedicated to art and I couldn't get anything through, but here he is on his first try, goes right to state.
When we became good friends, we started discussing and talking about our paths in intermediate school and middle school and high school. And we experienced some of the same things, but from different perspectives because we weren't friends yet. I like to tell the story of when people ask how we met, I pretty much give them the short version where we sat in the art room and we basically said, so you're going to University of Texas, I'm going to University of Texas, let's be friends. And that's the easiest way to sum it up because that kind of solidified us becoming best friends because we ended up going to orientation together. And then from there, we lived in the same dorm and it was kind of all planned out from there. And it was great having a friend going through college. I think that was a necessity, especially when you're trying to find yourself at that level. But the stuff that we kind of shared throughout high school is also kind of wild. So to bring it back, I had mentioned that I was born in the suburbs of Chicago. And then when I was in 5th grade, I moved to Texas and started intermediate school here. And for anybody who doesn't know Texas education, intermediate school is 5th and 6th grade. You get to middle school, 7th and 8th, and then you finally get to high school, which is 9th through 12th. We had actually had very eerily similar paths in the same instance, right?
Yeah, you came in 5th grade and I came in 6th grade. So just a year after you. Which is funny because that's why when I was at your house what was it, 2 weekends ago, looking through yearbooks, I was trying to find myself and I was like, oh yeah, that's right, because I came a year after you. We had that similar background from Chicago, moved to Fort Worth, Texas of all places, in this Keller district neighborhood. I went to the same schools, and I mean, I remember the first time seeing you and recognizing who you were really back in middle school. And I don't know if you remember this. We had 3 separate teachers, right? You had your home teacher, who was like your home base, and then you would then shuffle around to like your social studies history teacher, and then your language arts teacher, and your science teacher. So at the end of the year, all 3 teachers would get together and decide one boy and one girl to be the best in class. It's like the top choice. And of course, me being type A, being very academic, I'm thinking, I brown nose pretty good. I think I got all 3 teachers on my side, sitting there waiting for my name to be called. And next thing you know, they call Nik Skokowski up. And I'm like, who the hell is this kid? So you stole it from me.
Yeah, I actually, it was back when you'd get a trophy and not everybody would get the class trophy. So it was one trophy. I still have it. And in the past, I've sent you a photo of that trophy before.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
As a joke. That's one of our funniest stories. And it starts so early. It starts so early in our friendship. And then we go through middle school and then we go through high school. And, I know that you had mentioned that I was maybe more of the jockey type, but I shared a lot of the same classes, a lot of the same AP classes. And you also played tennis throughout high school. And you, if I recall, you were a pretty good tennis player.
I was okay. I mean, I made varsity junior and half a senior year, but yeah, I was decent enough, but our team wasn't like that greatest. So, you gotta keep that in mind.
Yeah.
But I still love tennis.
We both went to a school here in Keller, and we were the first 4-year graduating class at that school because they had just built the school. It was brand new, and they were pulling from the other middle schools within the school district. So it was either you had this chance to go to the high school where you had freshmen to seniors, or you could go to this brand new high school that would only have freshmen and sophomores and not a lot of sophomores because a lot of the sophomores didn't want to come from the schools as they were already in. So we basically got into this huge school, and I don't know if you remember this, but they had shut off the 3rd floor with all the classrooms. Like, you weren't allowed to go up to the 3rd floor because it was all off limits, but they had that 3rd floor there in preparation of the future classes. And now the class size is ridiculous. It's like 4,000 people. And when we first started, it was like 800 people. And then every year we added a grade.
Do you remember the rumor that went around that the architect of the building, of our school building, built like a jail or something? Was that true, or is that an actual rumor?
To this
was
day,
that real?
I still don't know, but when you look at the layout of the actual high school, I mean, it's a beautiful high school. And when I've brought people by it, they say, wow, that was your high school. It almost looks like a small college. But the layout is akin to like what you would think a prison is.
Right.
And being in the legal field, I find interest in some of that stuff. Like when I was in college, I was a sociology major. I really liked the criminal justice and criminology aspect of it, and that's what I focused in. And that was just due to wanting to go into the FBI. So you looked at prison systems and how they would be set up, and architecturally, you would have this center area, and from there, all the wings would branch out. And that's kind of how the high school was built. It was this big central area, and then you had wings that branched off of this central area. The rumors could possibly be true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I I wish we could go back. Well, actually, maybe you can go back and stop in the building and actually officially ask them now that you're an adult. They should tell you the truth, right? Do you remember if becoming a lawyer was ever anything that you imagined you'd do back in high school? Did that
No,
ever cross your
actually,
mind?
back in high school, I thought because when you're younger, your family tries to encourage you one way or the other. People had mentioned going and being a lawyer. They always say, "Well, you like to argue, right? And that's why you should go be a lawyer." But I remember I wanted to go work on the stock market. I wanted to go work in New York. Then I wanted to travel the world and do, something international. It was just when you're in high school, everything is a dream.
Mhm.
And this was before the big like YouTube and social media and influencer craze where, if I was in high school now, I might sit back and say, I would love to be like a travel blogger and just
Mhm.
live in the coolest of spots and go visit every cool hotel. But yeah, back then law school wasn't really on my plate. But I do remember when I was in art, and I don't know if you were on the trip, I think you were, but our art teacher had a former student who had started like a digital media company, and they
Mhm.
had worked with Pixar and some other
Mhm.
like local studios. And we went on a tour of the studio,
Mhm.
and I thought that was the coolest thing. I was amazed. I was like, okay, you can actually turn art into a business. Now, I didn't expect myself to get into art in the sense of like creating. I wasn't trying to be a painter or a digital illustrator or anything of the sort, but I thought, okay, I could get into the business side of things and I could go get a business degree and still kind of leverage the art aspect of it. So that was kind of an interest. And I think that kind of led into me applying both to the business school and the art school going into college was kind of that trip in which you can kind of do it all with your interests. Were you on that trip? Do you remember that trip at all?
I absolutely remember that trip. I remember exactly who it was and the name too. Yeah. But yep, remember the trip. I thought the same thing. Like, this is awesome that you could turn art into an actual career. Because you always hear that the trope is the starving artist, that
Mhm.
you can never make any money in art. But here we were with a classmate that was not that far removed from our grade,
Yeah.
doing it pretty well.
People joke core memory, right? You
Mhm.
and I haven't had this discussion
No.
ever, right? And here I am talking about it, and you shared the same memory of going on that trip. And at that point, we weren't friends; we were just peers.
Acquaintances. Yeah. We knew of
We,
each other, we knew we
yeah,
existed.
yeah, we knew we were in the same class. Obviously, that's the crazy thing of when you start going down memory lane with friends. You open those little parts of your memory, and you're like, oh yeah, we did that. That was pretty cool.
So for me, I mean, I always knew I was going to be doing medicine because my
Yeah.
parents always said I was going to be doing medicine. So art was kind of my escape. I knew that that was something I really enjoyed to do. I wasn't quite sure if I wanted it to be my career. And when I found out about medical illustration, that was what drove me to try to apply to the art school. And as we spoke about in the past, I did not get in the first time I applied, and I had to reapply. And that's why I ended up staying my fifth year. But when my parents found out, or actually I didn't even tell my parents that I had applied to the art school because I know they were going to be against it. But once I finished my science degree, and then I told them I was staying an extra year for my art degree, there was nothing else that they could say because it
Hmm.
was either that or come home, right? Because I
Yeah.
hadn't gotten into med school yet. So they let me do it reluctantly. But it was a good experience. I mean, it only helped me solidify becoming a physician.
Now, what was so frowned upon about the art aspect of it? Because you were an amazing art. I mean, you still are, but you had amazing art pieces, and you were probably. I know that you didn't win state, and the only reason I won the state was because, categorically speaking, I was placed in a category that was of lower caliber than the one you were trying to get into,
Hmm.
because it was more so a first year artist versus someone who had been a 4-year artist. But why was that looked down or frowned down upon from your parents?
For my parents, not speaking for all Asian
Yeah.
parents, but my parents are very traditional.
Hmm.
Their focus was always education. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as you academically do well. Anything that distracted me from academics was frowned on. When I played tennis, they didn't like that. When I did my art, they did not like that. Even though I was making straight A's in all my other classes, they just felt like it was a distraction from the main goal, which was getting into college, becoming a physician, getting through all that. But now, talking to them now, explaining to them that these were outlets for me so that I had a break,
Hmm.
so that I didn't have to focus in on just studying every single day, book work, book work, book work. It was an outlet, it was a hobby, um, to allow that essentially work life balance. or school life balance so that I could make it through. And that's how I made it through, is that I maintained all those things, right? I continued to play tennis. I continued to do art through med school, through residency. I picked up pickleball now. And I mean, highly encourage finding those hobbies. And it also improves your application. It makes you a stronger candidate when you are well rounded. If I had done it my parents' way, where I only focused on academics, I would have made it as a physician. I think my application would have been so one sided. It would have just been grades. That's it.
You had discussed that on another podcast where you had mentioned that the art major had been kind of that standout piece that within your interviews and your application stood out to the interviewers and allowed you to kind of have a more well-rounded approach than just having the sciences as your background.
Absolutely. I mean, just going back to med school interviews, 60% of the interviews, most of the interviewers would ask about my art, and then that would be the tangent we would go off on. And so we would have 10, 15 minutes to interview, and the entire time we would be just talking about my art, which would made it so much easier, right? I'd rather be talking about art than my grades, or why did I get a A minus in this course or B plus in this course rather than an A. Like it was better to talk about my hobby than it was talking about my actual resume of why I wanted to become a doctor, what pulled me into this field, things like that. So like the tougher questions were abated because I had that art degree. So it was really nice.
And to that point, for anybody who hasn't gone through a formal interview yet, whether it's for a job or for school, when you're having that type of an interview where you're actually more so building rapport with the interviewer, sometimes you go further than if you had just walked through your resume. I know that I'd mentioned that during law school, I interned with American Airlines. And at that point in my legal career, I didn't have the strongest resume. I had a decent one. But when I did a feedback session with my interviewer, who was also my mentor throughout the summer, she had told me that one of the reasons she selected me was because out of all the individuals she interviewed that summer, I was the one person she'd want to sit down and have a beer with. And I thought that stood out because I just went in there and I was just myself and I built rapport and I was nice and kind and we hit it off. And it seems like that's why I got the interview, as opposed to, well, your GPA looks like this and you've taken these specialized classes, so we'll offer you a job. It was, hey, I would rather have a beer with you. And I actually think we went out with the group and had a few drinks, and it was great. And it was exactly what she called. We had a great time with all the students and all the counsel there, and it was fun. But the rapport building, especially in an interview, is super, super cool and super important too.
Yeah, and I don't know where you learned those skills from, but that was always like the one thing I admired about you. I don't want to put you on too much of a pedestal. That I will say, when we first met, that was the one thing that I was so impressed. Like, just you seem so confident about just everything. I felt like you led the way to the orientation. You led our way to meeting our new friends, but just that confidence and just the ability to talk to anyone on the street. Like that was the one thing I wanted to replicate and learn. And so I tell people all the time that I appreciate you taking me under your wing, whether you meant to or not. And that's kind of where I grew, is watching you kind of interact allowed me to learn my bedside manner. So you can kind of take credit, but not too much credit, because, it was just the ability to see that whether you have something to back it up or not, but speaking in confidence really takes you off our distance. A lot of people around notice that confidence.
And I appreciate all that. And I think you would have been just fine on your own. I mean, you are one of my best of friends, and we had a lot of fun times in college. But I also got to see you come out of your shell. And I mentioned before, you were one of the biggest introverts, and now you're one of the biggest extroverts out of our friend group. But to go back, coming up in Chicago, so my mom is from Colombia, South America, and she came to the United States when she was in kindergarten. And they lived in the city. And then my dad is just a Polish German kid who lived out in the suburbs, and they just so happened to meet. But they were really big on, when they were raising me and my brother, on bringing us into the city and introducing us to different people and different cultures and different cuisines and different situations. And I think that helped coming to Texas, because when you come to Texas, I know a lot of people have this viewpoint of, okay, I've never been to Texas, but it's cowboys and desert and horses and whatnot, but it really isn't. But it is a very more so, and I don't mean this in a political sense, but more conservative, slower, way of life at times. Smaller communities. I know that the community that we're in right now has exploded in population and diversity. But when we moved here, all the subdivisions were starting to be built. There were still gravel roads. All the farmland was starting to get purchased and new things were being built. But it was just kind of that way of life down here. So I felt like when I got into school, it was easier for me to communicate with people that weren't like me, when some kids at that age haven't had that experience yet. Some kids are so used to, well, I'm only around people that are like me, and so I don't know how to embrace others of different cultures or races or creeds or what have you. I was able to carry that over a little bit. I thought that was important to have throughout my career, and it's something that I've really benefited.
Yeah, and just to kind of show the other side, I told you my parents were a little bit more strict. The focus was always academics. So that I think that that's kind of why socially I was such an introvert and was a little bit more afraid to speak to strangers because I never was really allowed to, I guess. I was always inside the home. I wasn't really allowed to go out and play or go to like sleepovers or anything like that. If I were to leave the house, it's either to school or to the library. Like those were the two places. Like they were quite strict. Of course, they changed up their parenting style as soon as my little brother was born. He was definitely spoiled and he got to do whatever he wanted. So, but yeah, I mean, it's just so interesting that how the way you raise your kids obviously will affect the way they interact with the world too. And so I'm very cognizant about that now with a 4-year-old son and a almost 2-year-old daughter, that I want to make sure I cultivate those things just like in what your parents did for you, is cultivate the social side of things too, and the diversity and being able to talk to everyone and anyone. Yeah, very important skill to have.
And that also lends it to us becoming friends, as well as the friend group that we created throughout college, because obviously we do not look like each other, right? We are from different cultures, different ethnicities, but we're best friends. We were able to also take that into college, where we have a very diverse friend group. With that background, if I had been really put in those situations when I was younger, I may have been more in my shadow of, okay, well, I want to be around like-minded individuals, white men. And that may have been inappropriate for growing and really coming into my own. So I appreciate my experiences, and I really was able to leverage that. And going into college, I know that you were introverted, but you embraced college. It wasn't like I had to pull you out of your shell. I had to push you a little bit to go to certain things like parties and events, but I was also finding my way too. You did well in kind of recognizing the fact that, okay, I'm away from my strict parents. I have this experience at one of the best universities with 50,000 people. The world is kind of my oyster. And I think that's why we got along so well, is because we were both up for the experience of college, knowing that we're the first ones in our family experiencing that. We had talked about how we were the first ones to get college degrees. And with that, we had nobody telling us how to do college. Nobody at all.
You hit it right on the head there. Definitely fun times, lots of late nights. The amazing and beautiful thing about Austin is that campus is basically intertwined with the downtown Austin. And so you really don't have to take a car anywhere. If anything, you might have to take a bus a little road down the road to get wherever you need to. But majority of the time, we just walked everywhere. Right? We walked over to West Campus. We walked down downtown. It was just a great experience, a great place to grow, like you said. I wish we could go back. I feel like we should have done so much more, even though we did a ton. If you really think about it, our core group started out in some private dormitories, and then we ended up getting our own apartment, which we threw some epic parties there. We almost joined a frat together. Almost. We got bids, but we didn't take it. I'm glad we did.
Against Greek life. It just wasn't for us.
You guys introduced me to like basketball games, volleyball games. Like going to watch that was fun. And of course, we always went to the football games. That was rain or shine. It was always a fun time out there with the crowd and the atmosphere.
Austin is an amazing place, and it's expanded so much. And back then, I'm gonna age us. We didn't have Uber, right? So we had to walk everywhere, or we had to arrange a taxi. Like coming back from 6th Street, we actually had to hail a taxi if we wanted to get back. But most of the time, we said, "Well, we can just walk. Let's just walk to save the money because you're a broke college student." We gave UT the best shot we could with the knowledge that we had, because now that I look back, there's so many other things that we missed out on that we just weren't aware of. There's an amazing food scene, and there's some amazing parks, and there's other groups and organizations. And I know that we kept more so to the college life, but there's so much that goes around that's not actually related to the college that we missed out on just by not knowing. But now looking back, you realize you don't have to be a college student to experience Austin. In fact, that's only one microcosm of that city.
But that's mature adult Nick talking and thinking, like back then, did we really care about the parks? No, I don't think that was at top of mind. But
No.
no, we had fun time anyways. And again, meeting all the people that we did. And that was the thing. Like you said, our group was so diverse. So we didn't get funneled into me just knowing pre-meds, you just knowing pre-law or just psychology, similar major
Yeah.
classmates. Like we were getting to know engineering students, we were getting to know like sociology and art students, and we just the whole gamut. Because of our friend group, we were able to pull in so many different facets of the network there.
And I actually think that's something that was also kind of counterintuitive to some things at UT, because there were things that we saw at Texas in which groups weren't that diverse, where it would be like maybe a group of all jocks, or maybe a group based on culture or religion or even skin color, right? And these groups, they would stay together throughout, where they would do intramural sports together, they would go to the bars together, they would be in classes together. And you could tell that although they may have been friends from maybe their hometown, they weren't necessarily getting as diverse of an experience as we were, because we were so open to, and I'm not saying that our way of approaching college is better than anybody else's. I just appreciate the fact that we really got to experience a lot of diversity within our friend group, and not just with like skin color and backgrounds, but we had individuals that came from different parts of the United States. We had individuals that were pursuing different majors and different careers. And it was just beneficial to kind of see how other people approach life, and you get to take the good out of that and move forward with it.
Yeah. And I feel like that's kind of what inspired this podcast was kind of those conversations we used to have, because like you said, diversity, but also I don't know if you remember this, we were all different religions too. So just like the way we think about life was very different. And so we would sit 2, 3 a.m. in the morning while one of our friends is playing video games, and we're sitting here just chit chatting, and just a serious topic would come up, and we wouldn't stray away from it. We would dive deep into that conversation and just try to hammer it all out to see each other's perspectives and understand each other's views. And I feel like that's kind of what led me to want to do this again with you. And hopefully we can get some of our other friends to join in with us. But those are the conversations that were just so eye-opening, and you learn a lot from it. Doesn't mean it changes you, but I mean, well, it changes you, but it doesn't change however like it's not changing you at your core, but at least you are appreciative of other perspectives out there.
Yeah, and this is an important skill in law school. In law school, you can't always get locked into your personal opinion or your personal feels. I say that a good lawyer is somebody that can argue both sides of the law, because if you can argue the other side, you can be prepared for the other side's argument. And so it's very important to put yourself in a situation in which you can understand, comprehend, and try to put yourself in the other individual's shoes. And we did that a lot with a lot of our conversation. And that's something I want to pass on to my child, is being able to sit down, hear an opinion, not get necessarily offended by it, but keep searching for the reason and the logic and the common ground and the understanding. You may not necessarily agree with it, but at least you have an open mind towards the diverse perspectives. Our conversations with medical and legal, eventually these topics will get to a point where you and I are having a serious conversation and a debate over something, and trying to understand why it is the way it is from our different perspectives.
So similarly in medicine, obviously we have to deal with a lot of different types of people. And I remember a very specific encounter where one of my good friends from residency, she is Jewish by heritage and background. And there was a patient that came in very, very sick. I can't remember exactly what he was sick with, but he had a lot of Nazi paraphernalia tattoos on his body. So a lot of people took a step back and took a pause. But for her, she did not care. Her only focus was the patient. And that's so admirable I think that's the word, admirable, to watch her just didn't care what was going on in front of her other than what the patient was and the health, making sure the patient got better. Like she was truly such a good doctor that day. And we were just interns. So we were just fresh out of medical school. So the fact that she had that head on her shoulders to be able to operate that way. Because I remember that after we got the patient stabilized, everyone came to her and just asked, "Hey, did you notice? Did you realize who you were treating and how are you feeling about it?" And she said, "Yes, I knew exactly who I was treating, but that was it. Like I was there to treat the patient, fix the patient, and I did my best." And so, yeah, we deal with that all the time. So those encounters from our younger years or prior years is what builds you to become a better person, a better physician, a better lawyer. Because if you can't adapt and mold into your clients or adjust with your clients and your patients, you're not going to have very many people that want to come for you or work with you and work, yeah, around you.
Yeah, that's very interesting because there is ideology in the legal field of who deserves representation,
Mm,
right? But if you're standing on and I don't want to bring this political, but if you're standing on the Constitution and what the amendments are there for, everybody deserves their day in court, everybody deserves representation, no matter how heinous of a crime. And that's in our, fundamental constitutional values. And so in law school, they try to instill that in you, to say like everybody deserves representation because one day you might need representation for something that you've done and you'll want somebody standing there next to you, whether they agree or disagree with what you did, somebody there to help you navigate and defend you. And that's kind of akin to what that doctor friend of yours had to do, where it's somebody with completely different ideology. And you could obviously consider that a very disrespectful ideology. And she said, I'm not even looking into that. I'm moving forward with it. And it's commendable. It's very
mhm,
commendable.
mhm. Yeah. I mean, just to kind of bring it back to like positive light, right? So the diversity and the uniqueness and all perspectives and languages is one of the things that I love about medicine. That I don't know the history of the next patient that comes into my door, my office. I don't know what their medical history is, their surgical history, their family history, but it's fun to sit there and tweeze all that out and learn about it with them. I remember having a 90-year-old German grandma come in. She found me from somewhere and she just wanted to have a conversation about the LGBTQ community because her great grandson had come out to her and she was torn and she was like, "I grew up in a certain era where that was not the right way to live, but I love my great grandson. What do I do?" And I was like, "I can't answer that question for you. I mean, if you obviously still love him, that you're here trying to find answers." And we just kept talking about exactly what we're doing now, is just that the world has changed so much and we have immigrated and migrated and there's just so many people from other different countries everywhere. It's not just in the US. Hopefully you learn to accept, and you don't have to agree with the way other people live their lives, but you have to be able to be okay with it and let them do what they do as long as it doesn't hurt you or those around them,
Yeah.
obviously. But
Mhm.
but yeah, like profound conversations like that I have had with the youngest of kids and the oldest of adults. And that's what really, really pulls me and keeps me in family medicine. I mean, we talk about burnout and we will continue to talk about burnout in later
Yeah.
episodes, but that's the one thing that I actually really enjoy. I just wish I had more time to do it.
Yeah, profound conversations. My law school group, when we get together, it's one of my favorite times because as I mentioned, I'm not necessarily pursuing a career right now that allows me to actively practice law. I am an adjunct professor and I do teach and coach for negotiation, but that's few and far between every semester. But the times I get to sit down with my law school group and actually have these profound legal scholar-esque debates and discussions, it makes me miss law school. It makes me miss the time that I was actually in it for the 3 years and going through the learning of it. But now, we have all these different experiences of being out in the practice that allows us to go even deeper and deeper with what I've seen over the course of 10 years is this, that, and this. And now you've established patterns and you get to hear other patterns. And those types of conversations are really beneficial. And so for our listeners, whether you're in high school, college, post grad, law school, med school, or somewhere in your professional career, seek out profound conversations. It's only going to make you smarter. It's only going to make you more culturally diverse and open-minded. It's just a good way of looking at things.
Right. Tell me a little bit more about your trip to, you said you studied abroad
Yeah.
during law school, right?
Yes. So it was my second year, first part of the summer semester, because summer is kind of broken up into two sections where it's like 6 or 7 weeks for the first part, 6 or 7 weeks for the second part. And the reason that it's done that way is if you can fit in two internships, it allows you to fit in two internships. Because like we've talked about, law school goes really, really fast in terms of trying to find a career. But I decided to study abroad. And fortunately enough, I was able to go to Greece and Italy. So what it was is it was a moving program to where every couple of days we were in a different city. It was also really cool because during the Greece part of it, we were put on a cruise ship and we had to go throughout the Aegean Sea. So we got to port at all the Greek isles. But what we studied was comparative constitutional law. And it was super interesting. It's like my favorite word today is super, right? Outside of diverse. But it was super interesting because we studied the different constitutional constitutions of different countries. So how maybe Germany and their constitution look like compared to our constitution, and what those foundations really, really look like. And it was a great experience from the ability to really go see part of the world and see things that not a lot of people got to see. And one part of our program was we actually went to, I can only call it from my memory, like the Greek Supreme Court, and saw a death penalty hearing. Now, we all showed up in our suit and ties and watched it. Could we understand what was going on? Not at all. But our translator there was kind of sitting in the back of the courtroom with us, like whispering, like, okay, this is him, his defense. This is the appeal. This is the sentencing. But everybody has similar body language. So to read the body language of the courtroom, read the body language of the defendant, read the body language of the judges, it was very, very interesting, and not a lot of people get access to that. Same thing going throughout Italy. Our classroom was sometimes in the hotel. Our classroom was sometimes out in kind of like the park area. It was very beneficial for growing. Again, any sort of international travel is beneficial for growing. The one thing I did see, though, is that, again, you had individuals that were a little bit more socially closed off. And in some instances, I could really see the disrespectful American come out, in which, and granted, these are people from all across the nation going to this one program. It wasn't just through my law school. It was a program another law school hosted, and you got applicants from all over the country. There were some individuals that were maybe a bit rude, or maybe were a little bit more culturally insensitive. I did hear one individual throw out, "I'm an American, right?" And that was kind of like, you can't, like, this isn't our country. We can't go around saying that. But overall, it was a wonderful experience. And it ended up leading into my love for international travel, where when I finally took the job with the aerospace and defense company, part of my job requirements was traveling throughout the world and throughout the country and negotiating contracts, which two of my favorite things, travel negotiations. It was wonderful. But I do think the international travel, especially through your education, it's something that every person should seek out.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever get to travel for anything education related?
Not for education. I between the first year of medical school and second year of medical school, that's essentially what we call the last summer you'll ever have in the medical world, because after that you are applying to different residencies, you're trying to do research, you're basically building your resume for the next step in your career ladder. So that summer, I went with two other med school buddies, and we did 6 weeks where we backpacked across Europe. And just thinking back, that was some of the most carefree, just like flow wherever the wind takes us kind of like feeling. Like, I wish we could go back and get more of those moments. We had an itinerary, yes, but we were not afraid to deviate from that itinerary. And remember, we're type A, so that is a big deal that we didn't care. But it was just so nice that we were able to visit so many different countries. We did Germany, we did the Netherlands, we went up to Norway. We hiked Trolltunga. We got an amazing view from that. Yeah, we just went all over. We hit Spain as well, seeing all the different cultures, hearing all the different languages, trying all the food. I love food so much. Like I work out to eat. So that was just like my dream trip. And of course, we have to keep in mind though, we were broke students and we were traveling on student debt, right? Like we were taking out student debt to travel. And so we had to be very cognizant of how we spent our money. So we did a lot of hostels. We backpacked everything fit in our backpack. But even though it was not a luxurious trip, it was just so fulfilling from a life standpoint. I felt like it just really filled my wants and needs all at once. You know, it was just amazing. Yeah. And I feel like the only other time that I felt that free, well, two other times. One, when I got married and had kids. But another time was more recently where I actually went to my first music festival. And I'm in my 30s now, and I can't believe I missed out on that phase where I got to go to these music festivals. But that's the thing with postgraduate school, though, is you do have to sacrifice some things. And it's not necessarily because of time, but it's because of finances, right? Some of us who we had to fund our education from student loans, you really try to avoid pulling out extra for fun things. And so I didn't get to do those things. And now that I can afford it, I did go and I went to the Gorge for Beyond Wonderland. And it was same thing, 3 days of just the most freeing, carefree, like just doing whatever. It didn't, there was no itinerary and I could do and talk to whoever I wanted to. And it was just listening to music, laying out. It was amazing. And I feel like that's what I'm striving for now is that I want to find more of those moments and more of those moments with family and friends.
You make a very good point because law school is very similar in
Mm.
the fact that when you go from undergrad into law school, you're sacrificing kind of your core younger years where you should be making money, you start to make adult money, you can make the bad decisions. You're not necessarily tied down with responsibility, whether it be kids or a spouse. You can go find yourself, and that's your 23, 24, 25, 26. But while others were doing that, we were in our postgraduate studies. And to your point, unless you have somebody paying for your schooling or you found a way to pay for your schooling, post-grad school is expensive. Law school is expensive. Med school is expensive. You accumulate a lot of debt by doing it. Even my study abroad program, I had to take out additional loans so I could go do that. So you miss a little bit of the fun where there are times when I look back and I find myself making up for those 3 or 4 years as a 36-year-old trying to do the festivals and do the things that I should have done when I was 23 or 24. But that's because you go through school, you study, you go into your profession, you're trying to pay off debt. And by that point, you're also like, okay, well, now that I have adult money, I also need to start investing in the things that make me an adult, where you're buying a car, you might be buying a condo or a house, or at least at the time when we were younger, that was something that was achievable. I think nowadays housing is a little bit different. Become an adult faster than you realize, and that's because you've missed a chunk that individuals who didn't go post-grad really got to experience. And that's something that it's not necessarily a regret. It's just something I miss out on every now and then.
Right. Yeah. Half of our friends came out of undergrad and they went straight into their careers and they started early and they did well. I mean, my little brother did engineering and he didn't have to do all the extra the years that I did. And so he's well better off. I mean, he paid his student debt very quickly off. Actually, he didn't even have student debt because he had a full ride. But yeah, just comparing. And so the one thing that I feel like I needed to make sure I did to myself was focus it on my path, right? On my goals, and that I shouldn't compare myself so that I could make it through to the other end. And now we're on the other end. We are making a better living. We make a little bit better income than we would have otherwise. So we get to do things a little differently. I just wish our bodies would keep up with our mind. I feel like my mind and my brain is still 20, but my body feels like it's 40. You know, I can't stay up as late. You know, it's just so different, but that makes me think ahead even further. Like, we are in a country where our focus is work. Like everything day to day is about making money, spending time at work, and then whatever extra time you have, that's what you spend on your social life. But that means as we get older, when we actually finally hit retirement where we can focus on the social side, is our body going to be ready to handle that? Are we going to be able to travel? Are we going to be able to do all the things that we want to? And that's where our generation, our millennial generation, struggles with. But I'm seeing that Gen Z does an even better job at work-life balance and making sure that they don't take any flack from employers. Like they are going to put those boundaries up and maintain the boundaries. Whereas our generation struggles with that a little bit more because we are still a people pleaser. We were taught by our parents who are part of that generation where they told you about the story about how they had to trek 3 miles in the snow, of 6 feet of snow and didn't have any heat. So it's just interesting to kind of watch the generations grow up, and I really admire that about the Gen Z generation. And I'm hoping that I can pull some of that zest and some of that aura that they put out there.
I think there's a joke where it's like the millennials walked so the Gen Zers could run. That's exactly how I feel about it. Well, I know that we're getting to the end of the conversation. Obviously, I think it's important that we show a little bit more of our personality in these conversations because we are human. We're not just professionals, but we are human. And I want to ask you before we end it, what is one of your funniest or fondest memories from our time in college at the University of Texas at Austin?
Fondest. Do you have one in mind already since you're asking the question?
There's one with us, right, which I actually think is hilarious, and it is the Alpha Beta Wi-Fi.
Gosh. Yeah,
So
great. Yep.
I'll
A
tell this
memory I
story really
definitely don't
fast.
want to relive, but sure.
So, like we mentioned, first one's in college in our family. We were trying to figure out whether, the frat life was for us. But initially, we want to go to a party. How do we go to we don't know anything about getting into parties. So, was it during orientation that this happened?
During
Yeah.
orientation.
So we had met some other guys during orientation, and somehow one of them had an in on a party. And him and I were walking around campus, and Long, I think you were at an event, right?
Yeah. I was doing
Yeah.
something important, very important, always.
So we end up finding out where the party was, and we call Long and say, hey, we need you to meet us right now. No time for questions. Meet us at the tower, which is in the middle of campus.
No
So he's
details.
like,
Remember,
oh,
it's just
no
meeting. No
details.
details.
No details at all. So we end up meeting him like 5 or 10 minutes later, and he's kind of out of breath. He was rushing. He has his laptop case, and this was before backpacks were cool. So everybody had these laptop briefcases with the hardcover to make sure your expensive laptop never broke. And he shows up and he's got it slung over his shoulder, and we're like, Long, why'd you bring your laptop? He goes, I just ran from my group. And so he's like, where are we going? We're like, we're going to a party. And he goes, well, let me go put my stuff up. Well, UT's campus is pretty big. So where we were staying at, I think it was Jester, which is a dorm, the walk back to Jester and then back to the West Campus where we were going would be like a 20-minute turnaround. And we had friends waiting on us that were going to show us where the party was at. So we basically said, hey, no time, let's go. So Long ends up bringing his laptop with him to the party, keeps it slung around his shoulder the entire time. And if I remember, you were playing games with the laptop still on your shoulder. You had it kind of slung around, and you're actually doing pretty well. Another fond memory, and I think it was you, me, and another individual. We went to the Texas, and I think it was Kansas or Kansas State game, and we ended up losing the game. But I don't know if you remember, in the middle, it started raining, and it poured rain, and they started playing, I think, Sandstorm, Darude Sandstorm on the speakers during halftime, and the entire stadium was soaking wet. Everybody was jumping up and down. It was almost like having a rave in the middle of the day, in the middle of a rainstorm. And I still have photos from that day, and I think that was one of the funnest football games I think we ever went to.
Yeah. Gosh, my memory, I feel like the memory that I enjoyed is when we went to Vegas. This
Yeah.
is, what was it? This was after, I think it was like after second year or junior year.
It was
We
senior
decided,
year because I had already graduated because that
right,
was three and a
that's
half
right,
years.
that's
So
right.
I was up in Fort Worth already.
That's right. Yeah. And we decided that it was going to be the four guys. We're going to all drive to Vegas together, and we would take turns. And I'm a speedster. I'm not going to lie. I go appropriately, but I speed. Yes. And I just remember driving in the middle of the night, and one of our friends wakes up and freaks out. I'm like, what? What? I've been driving this way the whole time, but he didn't realize that I was going that fast. But it was just so funny to just watch his reaction in the middle of the night. But that trip within itself solidified our friendship even more for years to come, and it was just a fun time, even though we were still kind of broke students, so we weren't able to get like the most expensive hotel. I mean, we stayed somewhere off We were on the strip, but it was behind the strip. And actually that hotel, and it doesn't even exist anymore. I think it's turned into
Nope.
something else. But it was just a fun time to go out there and just be idiots, like that's just what we were. You go through that phase where we're all idiots, but at that point we were drinking age, so we actually had fun.
Yeah, we were at drinking age during orientation too. Don't worry about it. But no, that trip was an amazing trip, and I think I remember during the drive in the morning when I was supposed to take watch, I asked him like, "Where are we?" And you're like, "We're already in Arizona," and I'm like, "Wait, just through the night? We're in Arizona?" Because I knew how long it was supposed to take. It was supposed to take like 6 or 7 hours to get through Arizona, and we made it through in like 4.5 or 5 hours. And it just didn't make sense how fast we had gotten through the state. And it was all because Long was a speedster. But yeah, that trip was awesome. And as broke as we were, I remember us all dressing up in like slacks and dress shoes and button ups and ties, trying to
Dude,
look cool on this trip.
we thought we were the guys that everyone wanted to be. But that's just like most friend groups. I feel like we all kind of go through that phase where we just think we're the the best of the best. But that's that confidence. I feel like it's important. No, as long as it doesn't turn into arrogance. And I don't think we were ever, any of us were ever arrogant. We were confident, but not arrogant. And so I really appreciate that.
It was a good time. So with that, Lon, I know that you've had a busy day. So that's it for this episode of the Medical Legal Brief from Medicine Meets the Law. If you like what you heard, share it, rate it, and give us a follow. We're on Spotify, we're on YouTube, we're on TikTok, we're on the whole Instagram. Give us a follow and give us a comment too. Let us know what you want us to tackle next time. Let us know what you want us to talk more about. If you have any insider input, we would love to hear it. But that's it today with Dr. Long and Lawyer Nik. So thank y'all, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, we're doctors. Yes, we're lawyers. No, this podcast is not medical or legal advice. Do not take anything we say as a reason to perform your own heart surgery, represent yourself in court, or diagnose your neighbor's rash. This is for entertainment only. Think of it like hanging out with your smartest, wittiest friends, not a substitute for an actual appointment. If you act on anything we say without talking to your own professional, that's on you. Seriously, don't do that.